But should anything be redacted on the royal family, apart from security issues?
Well, this, I think, is the debate of how the royal family play the PR game going forward.
Just when the royal family thought Andrew was dealt with and filed away as yesterday's problem, a new headache has landed. And it comes with a very specific price tag: £90,000. Here is what has people talking this week. Official government documents about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's overseas travel were meant to be released as part of the National Archives' annual document drop. These are routine releases, often dull, often forgotten about. Except this time, at the very last possible moment, the Cabinet Office stepped in and blocked part of the file. The timing alone raised eyebrows. The documents in question relate to a 2004 Royal Visits Committee meeting. Buried in those minutes was a discussion about Andrew's foreign trips while he was acting as the UK's special trade representative. The committee was debating how to fund an extra £90,000 for his overseas travel. Nothing explosive on the surface. And yet, just as journalists began reviewing the material, the file was suddenly marked as closed under a legal exemption for information relating to the royal family.
The invisible man. All signs point to that being Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the former Duke of York. In a 2001 email to convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell, the invisible man writes, "I'm here at Balmoral summer camp for the royal family."
When it finally reappeared, it was barely recognisable. 16 of the 80 pages had been removed entirely. The rest were heavily redacted. The Cabinet Office later said this was down to an administrative error and insisted the document was never meant to be released in full. That explanation has not satisfied many people, especially given how routine these releases normally are. What we do know from the unredacted portions is that officials were discussing the cost of Andrew's trips to China, Russia, Spain, and parts of Southeast Asia. These were not private holidays. This was Andrew operating in his role as the government's trade envoy, a position he held from 2001 until 2011. A change in royal travel rules meant that funding for these trips was no longer coming from the Department of Trade and Industry. Instead, the Royal Travel Office would have to cover the costs. That is where the extra £90,000 came in. So, on paper, this looks like money being moved from one government budget to another. Accounting, not scandal. Which leads to the obvious question. Why the sudden panic? Why the redactions? And why now, 2 decades later?
Andrew has previously admitted to associating with Epstein, but denied any accusations of wrongdoing, including claims by the late Virginia Giuffre that she was trafficked to the then prince as a teenager.
This is where Andrew's past comes back into focus. During his time as a trade envoy, he became known for relentless international travel. The nickname Air Miles Andy did not appear out of thin air. He flew constantly, often to regions where political sensitivities were already high. In that role, he also brought some deeply controversial figures into royal spaces. One of the most infamous examples was Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the son of Libya's then leader, Muammar Gaddafi, who was received at Buckingham Palace. That meeting caused outrage at the time and was widely criticised. Andrew also entertained the son-in-law of Tunisia's former president Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, another figure linked to corruption and authoritarian rule. And then there was Timur Kulibayev, the son-in-law of Kazakhstan's president. Kulibayev's name is forever tied to one of Andrew's most puzzling financial episodes. In 2007, Kulibayev bought Andrew's Sunninghill Park mansion for £3 million, above the £12 million asking price. There were no other bidders. The house had been sitting unsold for years, and yet it suddenly sold at a premium.
Andrew is far from the only figure to be implicated with the disgraced financier. Donald Trump's name has come up dozens of times in this latest release, including in an email from an assistant US attorney.
At the time, eyebrows were raised. Today, it is mentioned again whenever Andrew's financial dealings are discussed. There were also diplomatic concerns about Andrew's behaviour overseas. In 2010, a leaked US diplomatic cable published by WikiLeaks described him as speaking cockily during an official engagement, with discussions that were considered rude. That assessment came from a US ambassador, not a tabloid columnist. By 2011, pressure over his expenses and his associations with questionable figures forced Andrew to step down as a trade envoy. The role quietly disappeared. The nickname remained. Fast forward to now, and suddenly government departments are scrambling to keep details of those years out of public view. That is what has people uneasy. Not just the £90,000 itself, but what else might be sitting in those missing pages? One situation that continues to come up whenever Andrew's overseas conduct is discussed is his behaviour during trips to Thailand. According to multiple accounts that have circulated for years, Andrew stayed in extremely expensive hotels, often booked at public or quasi-public expense.
According to royal historian Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, Andrew allegedly arranged for around 40 escorts to be brought to his five-star hotel over just 4 days during what was a taxpayer-funded trade mission.
And treated the trips less like official trade missions and more like personal indulgences. One particularly damaging allegation, first reported by several journalists and former insiders, claimed that as many as 40 women were said to have come in and out of his hotel rooms during one stay. The exact details remain disputed and no official guest lists were ever released, but the scale of the claim alone caused serious concern at the time. These stories added to the growing view within Whitehall that Andrew's judgment abroad was poor, his sense of entitlement unchecked, and his understanding of appropriate conduct increasingly out of step with expectations of someone representing the country. Even then, officials privately worried about reputational damage, especially given the lavish settings, the eye-watering hotel bills, and the lack of clear oversight of who was being entertained and why. The Jeffrey Epstein saga has seemingly taught the royal family a painful lesson. Information has a habit of resurfacing. Files get reopened. Whistleblowers talk. What once seemed safely buried often comes back at the worst possible moment. And that is why this relatively small sum has caused such a stir. It is not about the money. It is about the fear of what wider scrutiny could reveal if those travel records were laid out in full. As we head into 2026, the last thing the palace needs is another slow drip of uncomfortable revelations about Andrew's past, especially ones that involve government funding, foreign travel, and meetings that were controversial even at the time. So the question now is a simple one. If this file caused such alarm, what other documents are still sitting in archives, quietly waiting for a red marker pen? Do you think the redactions are genuinely about privacy, or is there more to this story that has yet to come out? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to stay up to date on the latest royal developments, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for watching.